Hello, I'm sitting here with James Bryant of Carpe Diem Fine Books, Monterey, California. We're at the Seattle Antiquarian Book Fair. It's Sunday, October 11th, 2009, and James and I are going to talk a little bit about his life and his time in the book trade up to now. And thank you for joining me here. Let's just start out with reviewing a little bit about your family background, where you were born, raised, and where you went to school, things like that.
Taylor, I was born and raised in a small town in North Texas, Denison, Texas. Both my parents were kind of pioneer families in that area. My father was a professor, biology professor, at a small college in North Texas. My mother was a school teacher, but as the family grew, was a housewife. That was the time, the late 40s, early 50s.
How many brothers and sisters?
I had an older sister, Mavis Bryant, who was a bright girl, Stanford graduate, and a younger brother, the three of us. I actually graduated from military school in Culver, Indiana. Culver Military Academy. Spent 2 years at the University of Texas. After that, I had a hard time attending classes there. Transferred away and eventually graduated from Austin College, which is about a 1,200 student Presbyterian school in North Texas.
Now, what was your degree?
Bachelor of Economics.
Economics, really?
Following that, I went in the Navy immediately. Served in the Navy from 67 to 70. And I was not. My tour duty was in the Mediterranean and the East Coast, but served in the Vietnam era. And I was attached to a fighter squadron, so most of the people in that squadron were coming from Vietnam or going to. Subsequently, I was a stockbroker in Dallas for 5 years, and with a change of life, I moved to California, and my first encounter with the out-of-print book business, I went to Sacramento. I went to work for Mike Slicker, who had a bookstore called Affinity Books.
In Sacramento this time.
This was in 74. I worked for Mike of course, Mike is Lighthouse Books in St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, Florida, right.
But he was probably a graduate student at that point. But I worked shelving books, and it was a kind of a metaphysical oriented bookstore.
Must have been an interesting change from being a stockbroker to shelving books in a second-hand bookstore.
It was, and a welcome change. I actually then briefly became a stockbroker again in order to earn money, because the used book business even then was a challenge to support yourself.
So that was in Sacramento? In
Sacramento. But
may I ask, just before we go on, how did you happen to come to Sacramento, migrated to Texas?
Well, I had a friend in Texas whose husband lived in the Sacramento area, and so he came to visit. I, at that point, had quit my stockbrokerage job and was kind of in semi-retirement as long as my small inheritance lasted. And so she and he convinced me to come out to Sacramento, and it was time to leave Texas. It ended a marriage, and so Sacramento was the spot. I landed, and I actually stayed in Northern California there for about 15 years after that, and knew Barry Cassidy, met Barry Cassidy at that time, who was an influential force in my book world.
Very much Barry Cassidy, a bookseller in Sacramento to this day.
Exactly.
No longer a member of our association.
No, and Barry still has an open shop and an interesting bookseller.
Absolutely, very interesting books.
So, I met Mary at that period. This is in the mid-70s. Mary Hill, my wife, and partner in the Carpe Diem. And we over the years, we had different spouses and continued to be friends. And in the early 90s, I actually was in the wine business through the 80s.
Oh, really? So how long did you work for Slicker?
Oh, only a few months.
Oh, I see. And then what did you do right after?
I became a stockbroker in Sacramento for a year and a half. And I briefly lived in Atlanta for 9 months, lived in Houston for about a year and a half.
In the stock business?
No, at that point I was the business manager for the University of Houston Alumni Association for 2 years. But came back to California to become associated with a fledgling winery called Renaissance Vineyard Winery. Originally as their CFO kind of person. In the mid-'80s, when the wines, we produced, planted grapes. This is far from the book business, but planted grapes, produced wine, and introduced them in the mid to late 80s. I became I was the president and more or less the person who went out to establish the sales, which was interesting and traveled the world. But in 94, Mary and I had become a couple, and her job...
Now, may I just nosily ask if you've been married again after...
After Texas?
Yeah.
Yes. And that marriage ended in 87, and then I was not married for a few years, and as was Mary's single. We started dating in 92, actually. And in 94, her job, which was in the computer world, her company was bought by a Provo, Utah-based company called Novell. And they asked Mary if she would move to Provo. She said to me, if I would go, she would go. So I decided that was the time to leave the wine business. We moved to Provo, and within a month or two, I met a bookseller there. His name's Lyndon Cook, and his business was called Grandin Book. Very Mormon-oriented bookseller. If you're in Utah, you're in the Mormon book business.
Better sell some.
You better be in the Mormon book business. But that was a great time, great timing. This would be 95 when I went to work for Lyndon Cook. Worked 3 days a week. He had bought a 50,000 book inventory out of a bookstore from a bookseller named, I believe it was Walt West. And he had all these books that had been warehoused, and Lyndon wanted to reprice them, so he hired me, paid me in books, and I would spend all day, every day with simples and price guides, and there was no internet. Repricing these books, knowing nothing, but learning every day.
Learning every day.
And at the end of the week, I'd have $300 worth of credit or $500 worth of credit. One of Lyndon's mistakes was I would pay myself in books, of course. And after about 3 months, it didn't take me too long, Lyndon realized I was taking all the best books, the good books.
What can you do?
Well, after you realize that they're the books,
You're learning
quickly.
the best way, by handling.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And of course, I met Ken Sanders in those days at garage sales or flea markets. And so after about a year, and of course, Mary was a businesswoman by day, book person in the evening and weekends.
Was this one of the things, not to be overly personal, but when you were getting together, your mutual interest in books was maybe one of the things that...
Well, we both were interested in books, and both like bookstores. And, not everybody enjoys spending time in books.
No, I know that.
So we could, to this day, that's when we go anywhere, of course, that's what we're doing. We're going to the bookstores. But, so after about a year of that, we're always in Sam Weller's. Tell a story about Sam Weller, who was an institution in Salt Lake City. We would go into, he had a second floor rare book room. Sam Weller always gave a 10% discount. But pretty soon we realized that these Arthur H. Clarke publications, these things, the older ones, they were really good. So one day we were up there and had a cart full of stuff, Western Americana stuff. And when we came down to the cash register down at the first floor, Sam saw us over. You would maybe imagine that the owner of the bookstore would be happy. Sam was not happy when he saw someone carrying all these books over. And he came over and he looked and he pulled them out he looked at the first book. Oh, no, that's the old price. That's the old price. Sam repriced our books at the register there. And I realized, okay, we're in a different game here now. So Sam was serious about the books. And I think from then on the prices started moving up in Weller's on it. So, and Tony was just beginning then.
Tony lived in Seattle for a couple of years back in the 80s.
Did he?
That's actually when I first met him.
Well, he and I believe his wife, this would have been 95, where he was assistant manager more or less with Joan May, who's still there, to my knowledge. But there were quite a few shops in the area. We'd scout there, scout Provo, and learning the Mormon books, developed a relationship with Westminster University there. And I always was, still am interested in universities when they dig session books. And we were there at the right place when they were wanting to sell some books. And then Ken, of course, would go down to Burbank and Pasadena and do book shows.
Was Ken Sanders on his own at that point?
Yes.
Or was he still Cosmic Aeroplane?
No, he was on his own.
He was. Okay.
He was Ken Sanders' books. Not so. I don't think he really was open to the public by appointment, pretty much. And so we would go there, but I just knew Ken more from the sales. And I remember when I don't know if you used to do the Burbank book show.
I did.
It was a good show.
It was very good.
This was right when it switched over to Sam Gottlieb. If you recall those years.
Sam Gottlieb, an Arizona bookseller who, I don't know what Sam's doing. I was in touch with Mrs. Gottlieb not too long ago. But,
Denise,
the subject of Sam didn't come up.
the lovely Denise, as we always say.
But the subject of Sam did not come up.
Well, Sam, I think, I heard that Denise finally gave him his walking papers.
I assumed that. I thought, well, good for you.
Denise kept Sam's business together for several years longer than it would have otherwise.
Not to mention keeping Sam together.
Yeah. Well, he had taken over from Diane and Saul, the Ventura Book Mall people.
Saul Grossman.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. And right then, when we started...
Weren't there some other people in that fair management sequence there, like Paul Hunt and... remember Jack Garvin from the Hollywood Bookshop?
Yes.
They all had little pieces of that fair, too.
Yes, but
was that maybe when I first met you? Was it one of those?
It probably was.
Right,
this would have been 95.
94,
yeah, about 95.
That would be it, yeah.
And then, of course, there was a Santa Barbara book show. I don't know if you ever did that.
I never did.
Richard Gilbo was a fellow who put that on. And
has he passed away?
Yeah, he passed away. So what we did the Santa Barbara show. Then our world, we moved back to Sunnyvale, California, San Jose area. In late '96, and of course that was another world, another book world. The Mormon influence much less. We were always interested in Southwestern Americana because Mary was from Southern California and my Texas connection. And those were great days, as you know. We would pack our little station wagon, we would take our little West Highland White Terrier, and we'd take a 2-week driving trip through the Southwest. Fill the car up.
On occasion, you made it up to the Northwest?
Yeah, we came up here. Yeah, in fact, we bought you sold us a great book up here, which I've never forgotten. Don't have anymore, but
I hope not. This like that.
Yeah, that limited Virginian.
That's right.
The Lister.
I've never had that again.
Well,
never imagine I will.
I've never seen that box again. I've seen the book once. A rare thing.
Yeah.
I remember walking in your shop. Here's something you should have.
I wasn't kidding.
You weren't, and we were smart enough or lucky enough to trust you on that. So anyway, we got back to Sunnyvale, and of course that opened up another world, and we met quite a few more ABA dealers in the area.
Who were some of the people you first got to know?
Susan Klein was there. George Kane was
Right,
there.
of course.
I was still in the ABA. In
Right.
fact, the first ABA book fair I attended, it was his last show.
Yeah.
So that would have been 96, 7, something like that. And met Vic Zoshak, who was, I think, at that time a new member.
Must have been very good.
And, of course, from Southern California, we had met Ralph Sipper and Ken Carmio, Lynn Unger. It's always a pleasure. And we would we were doing, I guess, 5 or 6 book fairs a year. And by appointment in our home, which is kind of always a joke because not too many people come into homes, and you really don't want too many people coming into homes.
Well, that seems to be more of a phenomenon in Eastern neighbors. There's more of that back east, a lot of small neighbors. At this point, we're talking about 95, 96.
We're back in 96, back to California, late 96.
Had you joined the ABA?
No. I officially began the book business in early 95, so I think it was 98 before I was eligible.
That would be right.
And I went out and Susan Klein said, if you go to the Colorado Book School, you can become an ABA member 6 months earlier, so in time to do the February show.
Oh, nice. Good.
So
Good suggestion.
I did that, joined, and did I guess it would be February 98 or something like that.
Now, was Susan your primary sponsor?
No, I think Vic was.
Vic?
And Susan was one of the sponsors. Ralph Sipper was one of my sponsors.
We should just speak about Susan just briefly because she's no longer in the book trade. As far as I know.
No.
Do you know anything about her? I think she moved back east.
Last I heard, she had moved to Virginia Beach, and her husband was a graphic designer. You may remember Bill Ahern.
Yeah, I do remember him. I like him.
And they, to my knowledge, they're in Virginia Beach. And the last I heard, she was in some sort of financial services sales. Although that world's changed so much, who
I was
knows?
going to say we may see her back.
She
in
may
the
be
book
back in
trade.
the book
That's
trade,
right,
yeah.
looking better.
Yeah.
Looking more secure.
But we knew Diane Peterson, of course, the late Diane Peterson, the book lady. So our business kind of meandered forward with Western Americana and Modern Lit. Mary being a Wallace Stegner devotee, and as we increasingly did book shows, we realized we needed to add, and of course you buy what comes your way. Well, then we moved down to Monterey, had the opportunity to move to Monterey in 99. And that, of course, changed some things. And when we now have an open shop. And so, whereas we used to be specialized, much more general.
I remember when you opened your shop and you sent out the announcement about it, and at the time, it was a very refreshing thing because it was right in the era where people were closing shops.
Exactly.
So I would like to ask you, what made you decide to sort of go against what seemed like an irreversible trend and open a shop?
Well, as is always the case, the books began to take over our home, or always did take over our home, and we needed a place to. When you're working at home, you start work when you get up, and you quit work when you go to. It's time to go to bed. So we thought, well, we need a place to work away. So we rented a storage space and worked there, kind of in addition to processing books we bought and putting books online, because we soon embraced the internet. We realized that the Monterey Peninsula is a wonderful area, not only to present books to the public, but to buy books. And we noticed when we were by appointment in our homes that particularly older people are reluctant to go into a private home, and probably with good reason. The people that would want to come make an appointment to see books often would be looking for stock that we might not have. So we realized to have an opportunity to purchase estates and purchase one book, people would be able to come in, see what our shop was like, and whether it looked like our shop would be the right place for their book.
Exactly. I've had that experience myself many times.
It's proved true. So we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 12 to 6, but we're normally there on Monday and often on Sunday, and usually in the morning and often after 6.
Now, what year did you open the shop?
We opened 4 years ago, so that would be, what is it, 05.
You know, just a moment ago you used a phrase, a word which popped out to me when you referred to your business, embrace of the internet. So I would like to ask you about that. About 95, 96 is when I think the internet first became a real presence in the trade. People realized that there was something to it, rather than just a few of the early pioneers. So you took to it right away.
Right away. And partly, I'd say, because Mary was computer literate, computer oriented. But in 95, Interlock, of course, was the first thing that came on the scene. And I remember they had a seminar at the Burbank Book Fair to try to explain to people about it.
So I suppose my old business partner Dick Weatherford was there.
Yes, he was there. I remember met him then. Young Dick Weatherford then.
Younger. We're all still young.
Yeah, exactly. All right, about the same young. But if you didn't have a bookstore, you basically to sell books. You kind of did mail order, or you did book fairs and collected names, which is great but slow. But the internet opened up another sales venue. Now, subsequently, of course, it's exploded and it's very different and it's very crowded. The other side of the internet was to find books, and one part of our business, doing business online, a bookstore, book fairs. Another part of our business is, which I don't think many, certainly not all booksellers do, is we've developed a relationship with a couple of institutions, not so much special collections as general collections, to supply out-of-print books, hard-to-find books for. And that's actually now 10 years I've been doing that. So it's another leg to our book stool that today another bookseller and I were laughing about. The serene storefront and then the back room where the swan is paddling feverishly, and because it's a challenging, competitive world. And one of the things you told me that we might talk about is where's it going, and that's a good question. I think we're all trying to figure that out. Try not to become rigid in our approach to business.
Absolutely, this has been my own sermon that I give over and over again. Is that those who insist on pretending that it's still 1985 or 1995 are going to fail. It's just a question of when.
Yeah.
What? As you said, the internet has become so crowded. So how would you describe its role in your business today?
Well, this is, to my perception, the internet has made the books that used to be your standard $10 to $15, $20 book in a bookstore you cannot sell.
No,
it's a $1 book online. They're giving them away out there. So I don't see the future of a large general bookstore in the long run. The rents are too high, the overhead, the employees. So I think that we'll see more 1,000 square foot. To the extent we do see bookstores surviving, will be small to medium size with a emphasis on the book, on scarce or unusual, and the condition, and also the depth of material. But so it'd be more of the book as an object,
Of course.
as an art object. And you see in the fair here today, many booths are displaying their books, but they're really art objects.
How about printed material outside of books, which we usually just refer to as ephemera?
Certainly.
Is this something
we're heading more into, because a book that is generic in a way. If it was printed in multiple thousand copies, one copy is interchangeable. with ephemera, it's often doesn't exist in quantity more. Plus, it's much more difficult to describe or find.
Because of the word that describes it as ephemeral.
It's ephemeral.
It was not meant to be saved.
Exactly.
Whereas the book was.
And also, much of that material has a nostalgia element that it shows a lot in images a world that doesn't exist,
Exactly.
but that we can remember.
Well, it's primarily what I personally collect myself are more visual things, ephemeral things, and books with big pictures in them rather than just rare texts.
Well, I think that's it's easier. That kind of a material, visual material, is more approachable, and you see it certainly in Los Angeles show. It's much more, and I think we're seeing it in every booth now, visual things.
You see a continued role for the book fair as perhaps the most logical venue to get a lot of people in to actually be able to handle books.
I've wondered that very question, Taylor, and to me, this show is encouraging in that regard. I don't know how many local shows will survive, but regional shows like this, I think, will continue. Now, Seattle is certainly doesn't I can't describe it. Doesn't describe this phenomenon, but there are many towns that don't have a bookstore, one bookstore. So for people who are interested, the book fairs will always have a role. And I think the regional ones will have an important. I mean, shows like this in San Francisco.
Any chance you're going to retire from the book trade?
Yes, I hope I will, but I will be very old, much older. I don't think I will ever stop being a bookseller as long as I can remember what I'm doing.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it so far. James, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Taylor. Thanks for including me.